Good morning, fellow Plexers. I've recently created a new Plex install video for both Windows 11 and Ubuntu 24.04, and then under Ubuntu 24.04 I made a video with all the cross-platform tools needed to maintain a Plex server. Today I want to cover a few topics for the new Plex server owner. I want to go over the Plex support documents, good folder structure that allows for an expanding Plex media library, and then I want to go over Plex server settings with the exception of remote access because I have a standalone video that explains all that. And lastly, I want to show you the HTPC client app. There's a version for Linux, Mac, and Windows. And that should be considered the premier client app if you ever question how media is playing on any other client device. You can test it in the HTPC client app. If it plays fine there, chances are you have a bandwidth or a client app issue and not a Plex server issue. So every Plex server owner should find the Plex support articles. And let me see here. If you're watching me for the first time, most of my videos are unscripted. I might start with a little list of what I want to talk about and then just wing it. So it's easy to find, support.plex.tv/articles. So if you read about how to do something in any of the Plex support groups on Facebook, take everything you read with a grain of salt until you can prove that it's good information by finding it in one of these support articles. So what I want to talk about first is structure. And if we drop down to your media, there's a highlighted article for movie files and TV show files. And if you click into either one, if I click into the first article under that, Plex is going to start off with showing you a structure example. They're putting all the media in one media folder. It could be on a NAS, and that would be a shared media folder. And then they break it up into three subfolders: movies, music, and TV shows. So naturally the movie content would go into the movie folder, music content into that folder, and television content into that folder. And then if you drop down, it shows you that in your movie folder you would then create a folder for each movie. And basically, this is pulled from the listing at either TMDB or IMDb. And there's ways to make sure that Plex never scans an item in wrong by using the source ID from either one. So we're not going to delve too far into this, but this is at your disposal. And I have a few different FileBot videos that reference all these support documents with how I create my expressions for FileBot. So then let's go into the TV show side. So it's giving us the same example at the top. Then as we drop down, so we've got the folder for a TV show library. And then it's basically the same thing, only you consult either TMDB or TVDB for the series proper name. Now the year isn't always included. It's rarely included in entries at TVDB. So if you're naming from the TVDB, this is fine. Plex does suggest you add the year in anyway, and then this is how it's formatted at the movie database. Now mostly the entries are the same at both databases, but the series title could be different. The movie database always includes the year just like it would for a movie, just like IMDb does for a movie. At the TV database, they don't have the year as part of the proper title. And if there were two shows in the same name, where at TMDB the year would tell which one you're using, at TVDB the first series to come out, say it was a UK release, gets the plain name. If there was later an Australian or a US release, it'd give it the same name and then might put US or AU in parentheses. Look up things like The Office, Shameless, MasterChef, things like that, or any of the talent shows that have different versions around the world, and you'll see how they're named differently in both databases. Okay, so now that we're aware of some basic structure, I want to show you what I think your preferred structure should be, and it's exactly what I use. Now, this is not the structure for my main server. I've simplified the names from what I'm using in this example, but this is a shared folder on my older Synology NAS, and I have two instances of Plex I can run on this NAS. The current one that's running is in a Docker container, and if I shut that container down, I could install the package version or the bare metal version to run on that Synology NAS. So media never goes into the install folder. It would not go into this for the package install, and it would not go into this folder for the Docker install. You have to have a separate media folder or a shared media folder on a NAS. And because I'm using Linux, there's a rule with Linux that's helpful to Docker to keep all folder names lowercase without spaces until you get down to the level of the actual Plex media. So inside my shared media folder, and it could just be a media folder on a computer, I have created a sort folder for every type of Plex library there is. And if I go back, let me see how my memory is if I can find this. I think it's up a little higher. Well, someplace you'll see Plex will list all the different type of libraries. And I'm not going to put my finger, oh, right here, I found it. You can create a movie library or multiple movie libraries, a TV show library or multiple ones. And you may think, why would I want multiple libraries? Well, if you plan on sharing with friends and family, and say you have 100 documentaries on DVD, you might want to keep those separate instead of mixing them in with your own regular movie content. This way, when you learn about collections, you can do unique collections in each library, and if you have a cousin, a brother, a sister-in-law who might be interested in that, they can pin the library higher, which I'll show you how to do at the end when we look at the Plex HTPC client. You don't have to. If you're going to have a small collection, you may only want one library of each. Larger collections, you may want multiple libraries. So that's why I suggest starting off with these library sort folders. Now this follows the Linux case rule that works well with Docker: no uppercase letters and no spaces. So inside the actual sort folder of for the movies, I have individual movie libraries, again without spaces or uppercase letters. All the media I'm going to show is all public domain media. If I go into the movie documentary library folder, then I have a properly formatted movie folder that returns to spaces and uppercase letters, and by default I add in the source ID from TMDB, just as Plex described in the naming article. Then I go even further with a file name. I don't have to, but I add the source ID to the file name also, and then I add in some descriptive information about the media itself. Now this is the one area I go off the rails slightly with something unsupported. In a Plex TV show library, you're instructed to put anything you don't want the TV show library to scan into brackets. That is not a rule for a Plex movie library, but I'm anticipating that it is, so I'm using that same convention to name both episodes and movies. If you go back to the support article list and you look at the movie versioning article, Plex shows you that you can have the same movie in multiple versions, and you'd have the proper name of the movie. This is very basic structure. You'd have the proper name of the movie, and then you would have a space dash space as one of their two official separators. The other is a plain period. And then afterwards you would put something like the resolution. And that way you could have a 4K copy, a 1080p copy, a 720p copy, a 480p copy, and even an SD copy, all in the same movie folder, to then choose before playback to play any of those different resolutions of the same movie. So I'm still using that official separator and just putting my extra information into brackets. With a Plex movie library, it doesn't really even care. But in a TV show library, the use of the brackets will hide that extra information from a Plex scanner. So I am anticipating that change that may or may not come. Okay, so if we back up, then you'll see I have a movie-main folder, and this is where the main movies would be. And if I look into the one for Big Buck Bunny, you'll see two different versions of this movie. And again, I've just got that extra information in brackets. And then if I go to this movie, now you'll see two versions. They're the same resolution, encoded differently, and one has an edition tag built into the file name, which is a Plex Pass feature. When this file scans in, the remastered tag will be added under its poster in your library, so you'll know that it's different. And I could put as a tag unrated edition, director's commentary. I could use anything I want. I do this uniquely in a 4K library. I just do edition-4K, and they have to be in the curly braces. I have some colorized versions of movies, like It's a Wonderful Life. I have both the original black and white and the colorized. So I use an edition-colorized tag for any colorized movie, and that way if I also have the original black and white version, they will appear in the library side by side, and one of them will be marked colorized underneath. So this is a great Plex Pass feature. And then in the support articles, there are two subtitle articles. One is for local subtitles, which this is an example. It's in the SRT format. That's the most compatible type of subtitle across all Plex client apps. And you'll see the file is named exactly as the original. Well, actually, this is not correct. This is a mistake I've made. Let me fix that. Okay, so when I rescan this library, Plex will pick that up. So the subtitle is named exactly as the original file, and then you put in either a 2 or 3 letter language code after it. So it'll be the file name dot the language code dot the subtitle file. PGS subtitles are harder for client apps to display without causing the media to transcode, and depending on your CPU and whether you have a Plex Pass to allow allow hardware accelerated transcoding, PGS subtitles can be problematic. Some Plex server owners, when they rip a DVD or a Blu-ray, they'll use a tool like MKV Toolnix to strip out the PGS subtitles and then find an SRT subtitle to either embed into the container file or to have separate like I have. But again, that's a support article document. And then there's also on-demand subtitles, which is only a client app feature. Plex has partnered with Open Subtitles to try to match up a subtitle during playback or before you start playback if the server owner doesn't have subtitles on his server. So again, the resource of the Plex support articles is the best thing you could use as a new Plex server owner. So now if you wanted a separate movie library for your kid movies or toddler movies, it's easy to do. And if you're going to use Plex as a DVR system, you may want to create a separate movie and TV show library just for DVR content if you don't want to mix that content that has commercials in it with your libraries that do not have commercials because you've ripped them from your own Blu-ray or DVD copies. So if I go into the music library, there's not really a good reason to use a sort folder because the chances are you're not going to find a reason to have multiple music libraries, but I'm following the same convention. So the Plex movie library would point to this level to then scan these artists. And this is all I could come up with for public domain audio media. So into the TV show library, if you were someone who wanted to rip anime and keep it separate, this is a good reason for a separate library. Again, I have a library for a DVR, a kids library, and the main library. So all you do is you point the library at this level or that level to then scan what's inside it, and you have a nice nested structure. You have the shared folder, you have your library sort folders, and then inside those library sort folders are the actual Plex library folders for each type of library. So good structure that can grow with a server is really one of the best foundations you could make. All right, so let's bring in the Plex web app. And let me prep it for a second. All right, so I've just slid down, so I'm not showing content from my own library. I'm down to the Discover area. So this is the activity icon. When it's spinning, it's doing something, and you can click into it. If it has a number associated with it, that means a client device is streaming on your server, and you can click into the dashboard of any server. You see I have 3 servers listed because I have 3 Plex servers running. My main one, this test one we're talking about now, and then another test server on my newer Synology NAS, which is actually where the media for this server resides, but Plex runs on better hardware that points back to this NAS. So it kind of all starts with your user account. In your account settings, you can do a few things. This is an important one. If you create a new server and you still are running the old server and don't want to shut things down right away, with this enabled, all your watch history will be transferred between any servers you're currently signed in on. So if you've made a lot of mistakes on your first server and you're building a second one, but you don't want to lose your watch history, this is the setting that you want to enable to transfer all that watch history. It will not transfer custom metadata. You would have to move a server to do that, but this is a handy thing to have. Most people won't run 2 servers, but if you create a new one, like I've said, this is what you want to enable to get your watch history over to the other one, so you don't have to do a full move of a server to new hardware. And basically that's the most important setting here. I'm missing on something. I thought there was the privacy setting here. In case you missed it when you first signed into Plex. Plex wants to be social. That's the one area of Plex I don't agree with. I don't want my friends and family that I share my media with to be notified when I'm watching something. And this is where my winging it sometimes doesn't come in to play the right way. For the life of me, I can't find where to. Oh, it's right here. Account visibility and activity sharing. So I have everything set to private and account visibility friends only. If I want to share with friends, that has to be set that way. But I don't want to share anything else with friends, nor do I believe they want to share what they watch with me. As a server owner, I can always see who's streaming through the dashboard. But to be notified that someone started this episode or someone started this movie, I don't think most people want that. So those are your account settings. If you just click the wrench here, you get into the server settings. This is where you can manage multiple servers. So this is my main server. This is the Ubuntu server I created to do the Ubuntu 24.04 new Plex install. That PC is shut down, so the server is unavailable. So let me change to the server we've been talking about and go through the settings. So you can also get to the account settings at the top that we were just at. Online media sources. This is a newer feature of Plex. And let me see. Let's see. If you don't want to see Plex's free movies and TV shows that have commercials in them, you can disable it for yourself and manage users if you want. So that's how I have it set on my main server, and now I'm changing it on this test server. And you can actually remove music from the discovery feature. You can disable live TV if you want. And let me just scroll down to see what else is important. So display activity from my friends on detailed page. You see I have that disabled. Display availability from other streaming services on details page is enabled. And right now I'm trying to find we'll come to it. If you list your streaming services, you need this enabled when you do a global search, because Plex will tell you where you can find media if you don't have it on your own server. With the exception of the Amazon Fire TV ecosystem, if you're using, say, a NVIDIA Shield or an Apple TV, Plex has designed this search feature to be a pass-through to an installed app that you've signed in with. So if you're searching with Plex globally and you know you don't have the media, well, if you have a Hulu subscription, a Netflix subscription, an Amazon Prime subscription, a Disney subscription, and others, if you're signed into those apps on your device that you're also searching through Plex with, there's a pass-through feature. So Plex will tell you that this movie or this episode is on this service. And you can start playback from within the Plex interface, and it will pass it off to that other app. And naturally, when you pause the stream, you'll be in the other app. When you stop the stream, you'll be in the other app and have to exit and go back to Plex. But Plex is nice just as a standalone client app, even if it's not connected to any server, to be a universal search engine to then pass through the start of playback to the actual service that the media is on. And it's unfortunate that Amazon chose to disable that feature to keep their customers more in the Amazon ecosystem. I don't think you're really out of the Amazon ecosystem, but they took a different view, and I hope other ecosystems do not follow that. I'm a Google TV guy, and it just works fine on my NVIDIA Shields or even the inexpensive $20 Walmart O&N second gen Google TV box that I have in the basement. Okay, so authorized devices. If you wanted to remove something, you can do it. So you can see you can see just the Android devices, you can see desktop, and you can see servers. So eventually, when I have no more use for this as a test bed, I'll remove this server. And I can actually do it now. When it starts back up, it will just add itself back in. Alright, so I haven't used these options, but this must be if you want to share your watch list or your friend's watch list. Webhooks is something I've never used, but some home theater people might want lights to dim automatically when they start a movie and that sort of things, curtains to close with home automation. This is how you get it to work, and I am hooked in to Track T. It stopped working. I haven't figured out how to make it work again. And if I had one thing I could tell Plex, it might be to include Track T integration or maybe something else. I think I'd rather have an upgrade with collections first, but this would be important to me personally. And this is where you'll list your streaming services. And you see I have Prime, Google Play Movies, Hulu, and Netflix listed. And these are other options that you could list to then use the universal search option to then pass through to an installed app to make it work. Now this won't work on the HTPC client app because you don't have any of these services installed as a program on your computer or laptop. Plex Home shows you anyone you've added to your server with their own email account and then added to home, or just accounts you've created to add to home. Now I'm not going to show you manage library access because that will show you all my users' Plex names. Privacy is pretty self-explicit when you go through it. This next section, Plex Web, this refers to the web app, which this is. And we need to talk about that for a second. So let me bring up my text document again. There's 3 ways to access the Plex Web app. If I copy this URL, well, really 4 ways. So this is just a login to Plex through app.plex.tv where I can manage my server from anywhere. I do not need to be on my own local network. You can also access the web app through a local host address, which is how a Windows install will open the web app if you start it from the toolbar in Windows or the taskbar in Windows. You can also use a direct IP address login to get to the same web app. They're all different ways to get to the same interface. And lastly, there's the Plex Player app for Linux, Mac, or Windows. And if I open that, that's off screen. If I open that, that's the same interface again. And you know, I haven't tested this. My assumption is this is only going to work local, but it may work remote too. So definitely app.plex.tv, that web app login works from anywhere in the world. The local host or the direct IP options are only going to work on your home network. And I almost lost my train of thought. This is its own client app. Let me demonstrate that with the Plex Player app for Windows. Let's bring it over here, and if I change the server to the test server and I drop down to manage libraries and I go into the movie library, let's pick this movie. I can start playing it in this web app. The web app is never the best client app to use unless it's Plex for Windows or Plex for Mac or Plex for Linux. So I've just paused it, and you'll see the activity shows a stream, and you can go in, and of course you want it expanded. You can see details of how that stream is playing. You'll see it's coming from my own local IP address of this desktop computer, which is fine to show, but you always want to mask out a remote IP address because that's your user's external IP address for their ISP. So then it shows you how the video is playing from both the video and the audio portions of the container file. So this is a 1080p that's encoded with H.264 and it's direct playing. And then the audio is encoded with FLAC stereo and that's direct playing too. So the HTPC client app is the best client app to use, probably followed by the Plex Player app, but all other web apps are not the best player to use, especially if you are having 4K media streamed, even locally. Okay, so let's back up and you can set some options for the web app itself. And again, this is client app settings, not server settings. One thing everyone should do is go here and check automatically sign in and drop down and save the changes. And that way, when you come back to the web app, however you're signing into it, you won't have to pin in again or sign in again. On my client devices in the web app, I check remember selected tabs, so wherever you leave a library, it'll be like that when you come back, and I'll show you that when we enter a library. You can play theme music if you want. You have your time format, and all these settings are pretty much self-explanatory. Most client apps now install and set the quality to maximum. You may have to do it like I just did for the web app. Debug I've never used. These player options are often confused with server subtitle options. Any changes here are just for this one client app and not for any other client app. Every other client app will have these same settings. And downloads is a Plex Pass feature, and I don't get involved with that, but you can see their settings for that here. So now if we go into the server settings, dashboard takes you to where we were already to show a stream playing. I'm not really sure what this alert is. I don't have anything that's converted. If maybe I was going to go on a plane trip and bring a low-end tablet, or my phone didn't have a lot of space on it, I could move media from my server to those devices through their client apps and transcode them as they're being moved, and transcode means to convert. And naturally, without a strong AI, you're not converting upwards, you're always converting downwards to a more compatible file format or to a smaller file size and smaller bitrate size. So this isn't a feature I use, but others do. Then into the general settings, this is where you named your server when you first started it. You can check for updates. You can push notifications. to the mobile app for iOS or Android. You can choose whether you want beta versions of Plex. I stay on the public. Again, I won't show the remote access because I have a separate video for that that already has my public IP address screened out. No one should ever adjust the agent settings for any reason. And in both videos, as I added libraries, I showed you my preferred options to add a movie or TV show library with the latest and greatest Plex scanners for each. There really is no reason to adjust any agent settings using those latest scanners. These library settings are probably the most important, and it will depend on how you store your media. So, because this server runs on the Synology NAS and the files are on the same NAS, I can scan my library automatically and also run a partial scan when changes are detected. If your server is separate hardware from where your media is stored, with the exception of a USB drive plugged in, you can't run these automatic scans and you'll have to use a time scan. For example, I originally ran my server on this NAS, and then I bought another NAS to make this one a backup, and it had a little bit better iGPU in it, and I ran Plex there. And then because I like to experiment and fool around, I bought an 11th gen i5 Intel NUC and decided to experiment with Unraid as only a Docker host, and I liked the outcome so much, that's where my permanent server is. So that mini computer is a separate hardware device, and it's connecting to network shares on my Synology NAS, which means on my regular Plex library, I can't scan automatically, and instead I choose to scan my libraries periodically every 2 hours. And on the old setup and this one, I empty the trash after every scan. So if you're using USB drives, you may want to uncheck the automatic scanning, and you may want to uncheck empty the trash automatically after every scan in case you accidentally disconnect a USB drive, or maybe you're using a USB hub and the power cord becomes unplugged. In that situation, nothing in your library will change if it's not scanning automatically. If it's scanning automatically and you disconnect power from your USB hub or you unplug your USB drive, Plex will sense those files are missing, it'll rescan everything, and then it will empty the trash. And if you've set up custom metadata or a custom movie poster for all that media, or maybe your naming convention isn't on point yet, and 20% of what was on that drive had to be fixed match individually as each movie was added, well, now when you plug the drive back in and Plex rescans it all, you really better hope your file names are in shape so everything scans properly. Otherwise, you might not know which movies were misidentified. So to prevent extra work, with portable drives, you really shouldn't even use a time scan or a automatic scan. You should just scan manually, and you do not want to empty trash after every scan. You can do that manually also. Next, you can adjust how many weeks are in the continue watching. I think I've increased that from my main server to 40 weeks. You can include season premieres. You can adjust the video played threshold before Plex considers something watched. And I think 90% is the default settings, and this is going to work for most TV shows and probably every movie except for movies with end credit scenes. So if you're at 93% and you pause a movie for too long and Plex cuts the stream off, it's just going to mark it as played, even though you may want to come back to look for that end credit scene. So there really are no perfect settings here. There's 90% works for most everything. And then you can change when the completion behavior happens. That's a newer feature. I just use default for all these. I don't really think too much about any of these. Besides some of these options, for a small library you can generate video preview thumbnails if you want. For a large library it's just a space waster, and I've never had this enabled, so I don't even know what I'm missing. You can choose how intro markers and end credit markers are detected and when they're detected. And let's see what's next. Network. So with my server, this is all just default, secure connections preferred. If I had a user that was using a really old Samsung or LG TV whose app hasn't been updated, whose Plex app hasn't been updated in a long time, if I took pity on them, I might be able to change some settings to allow that to happen. And right now I'd have to look up exactly what I'd have to do because it's not in the front of my mind right now. But a user like that should really just buy an inexpensive ONN device or a Fire Stick or a decent Roku. Transcoder will depend on whether you have a Plex Pass or not. And normally it says auto. And I think I showed this in my Ubuntu video where you saw an old NVIDIA card or the UHD Graphics 630 iGPU in that 9th gen Intel processor. And with that situation, I had to pick one or the other. Auto's just going to use what's there if there's only one option. But you can set it to that, and of course you have to apply your changes. Now, my normal server has a lot of transcoding power on its Iris Xe iGPU, and I can leave this unlimited. I have a lot of friends and families on my server, but there's not a lot of transcoding going on. I've got gig internet access. So most transcoding that happens is of the audio portion of the container file, the media container file. And that's usually because someone's smart TV or the Roku device might not handle the 5.1 audio channel because of the codec some of my media uses on the audio side. But you might want to limit this if you're trying to share with only a few people, and maybe you have coaxial cable internet with an upload speed of 15 megabits per second. I'm lucky to be in the fiber world. Languages is an important section. So let me go back to folder structure for a second. So let me find the movie that had a subtitle. Okay, so if this movie had foreign language sections, you might want the default subtitle, you might even want the hearing impaired subtitle, and you definitely want the forced subtitle for those foreign language sections. Well, to name the hearing impaired, you would add in a .sdh. To name the forced version, you would name it .eng or .en.forced. And then for any local forced subtitle you have on your server, these are the settings to set to have those forced subtitles automatically display when the stream is started for yourself or any friend or family member. So I prefer audio tracks in English, subtitle mode shown with forced audio, prefer subtitles in English, check the automatic box, and save changes. Now, If you have a movie and you didn't realize there's a forced subtitle that you needed to get for it, or it didn't come with one when you ripped it, or it wasn't labeled properly as an embedded subtitle or labeled properly as an external subtitle, these settings won't create a forced subtitle. You have to have the physical subtitle either externally next to the movie or embedded into the container file. And I've got a subtitle video too on my channel. So this is a great option to change, especially if you keep track of subtitles when you add media to your server. I don't do anything with DLNA, and scheduled task I think is important. Let me change to my main server. So I start the scheduled task to run at 1 a.m. and to finish by 8 a.m. I back up my database every 3 days to this folder. And actually I have everything checked except update all libraries during maintenance. My libraries scan every 2 hours. I don't need to add that extra step. So I optimize my database weekly. I remove old bundles weekly. I remove old cache files weekly. I refresh all local metadata every 3 days. I upgrade media analysis during maintenance, refresh library metadata periodically, and I perform extensive media analysis during maintenance. Now, with my Plex server running on an i5 11th gen processor, this is not taxing my system at all. If you're getting by running Plex on a ARM processor or Raspberry Pi, or maybe a really old processor, maybe a dual core or something, you may not want to enable all these. You can enable all of them and see how taxing it is to your system, but with a modern Intel CPU, you can do it all and you won't even notice it's happening. Extras are fun. You can add in pre-roll videos. You would add the path to a pre-roll video, and then before every movie that pre-roll video would play. And pre-roll should be short to not annoy your users. 8, 10, 12, 15 seconds. And I only use it during the holiday. I have a collection of maybe 20 or 25 different Christmas pre-rolls, and I can separate them by semicolons. Unfortunately, each one has to show the full path. So that makes for a really long string, but I have that text saved, so I can just paste it in December 1st, and then I remove it on the evening of December 30th to then swap in a couple New Year's pre-rolls that they'll play randomly. And I think I do it again at Halloween, and if I remember, sometimes I might do a 4th of July pre-roll. But usually it's just the 3 holidays. My 2 little grandsons really like them, and I don't really know if anybody else on my server likes them, but as long as the grandsons get a kick out of it, I use this feature. So then we're into the manage section, and with each of my latest install videos for Ubuntu 24.04 and Windows 11, I showed you how to add libraries. So let's switch away from my main server and go back to the test one. So I have a test library. I don't think that exists anymore, so let me remove it. So I have a regular movie library, a 4K library, and a kids movie library, and then a documentary one. So adding a library was shown in those videos, but I'll demo it here too. We'll add a music library. So I'll pick music. I'll just name it music. I'll go find the media, and now this is running in a Docker container. So my real structure has an alias that's defining the path of the container, and I've called that alias my Plex Media. You'll see it shows all my library sort folders. I can click into the music sort folder, into the music main library folder. You'll see my 3 artists. I'll click add. And with a movie and a TV show library, there's a couple small changes I make to the default advanced settings. I don't make any changes with the music library, so I can just click add, and you'll see Plex is scanning for that media. And if I click into it, you'll see the media. From the library mode, it shows it by the artist or the various artists for the one album, and it's all pretty simple. So then if I click optimize versions, if I've optimized anything, it would show here. This is not a feature I use. Live TV and DVR is a Plex Pass feature, and if I clicked on Setup Plex DVR, it will see each of my HD home run tuners. Unfortunately, Plex will not see the ATSC 3.0 channels. I run channels DVR on the side, and I can access those channels through that other DVR system. So let me just add my older 2-tuner HD home run device. And you'll see it's showing 50 channels. I'll set up the device, and okay, this was not in my mental script, so I need to find the zip code for Canastota 13032. I'm in a suburb west of Syracuse, but I have a pretty good antenna on the side of my house that has 2 stacks, and I can bring in all of my Syracuse channels and Utica channels. Utica's about, well, the towers are about 55 and 60 miles away. There's 2 towers systems in the Utica area for that market. If I don't pick a zip code in between, Plex will not have guide info for the distant Utica market. If I just use my local zip code, just in a suburb west of Syracuse, I'll only see my Syracuse channels. So you'll see I've got NBC, this is a Utica, CBS Utica, CW Utica, MeTV Utica, and then NBC from Syracuse. And then if I drop down, ABC, well, CBS and ABC from Syracuse. Drop down further, here's ABC from Utica with a My TV network out there. And if I drop down, I'll see my local PBS channels, and then Fox out of Utica, and then my Fox in Syracuse. And you don't have to enable all the sub channels. Like, I'll get rid of these. Because they're mostly 480 broadcasts anyway, instead of 720 or 1080p. All right, let's see what I have left. Well, this is the Ion broadcast, so I'll leave the extra Ion channels except for the jewelry one, and then I'll just hit continue. So again, this is a Plex Pass feature, and I could go to the guide now, but it's not going to show any guide data for a little bit. You'll see the activity window shows it. Well, actually, it's scanning movies on my main server automatically. For this server, it shows refreshing guide data, and then the guide data will pop in. And that's one of the reasons, if I back up, one of the reasons I show how to create a library for DVR, which we'll do now. You need one for movies, and you need a DVR library for TV. And you'll see this has a couple series in it from a previous demonstration. I'll get rid of them. So while you're waiting for your channels to scan, go create your structure, which is, again, we'll back up why I recommend the structure I do with the sorting folders. Because otherwise, in your main media share or media library, if you had 5 movie libraries and 3 TV show libraries or 4, and then 1 music library and then 6 different photo libraries, they'd all be listed here all side by side. I like the nested approach. So we'll create a library for anything DVR'd for a movie or for an episode while we're scanning the data. So add a library, movies, I'll call it movie-DVR. I'll browse. So this is the alias set up in my Docker container to my physical structure. I want my movie library sort folder and this structure even though it's empty. And these are this is the only setting I'll change for a movie library. It's not really necessary for a DVR library, but I always set the minimum collection size to 2 for a movie library. And now we'll create the TV DVR library. Let me just call this TV-DVR. Next, browse, again my container alias. Now I'm looking for the TV show sort folder, and we'll point to the DVR library that's empty. And normally for a TV show library, I pull all episode ordering from TVDB, and I'm just going to do the same thing. Again, I use Channels DVR as my OTA over-the-air DVR system. I don't really use Plex for that. All right, so when I click back into the live TV and DVR section, you'll see the channel source, which is the tuner. 50 channels with 35 enabled, and these 2 green dots show the available tuners. If one tuner was being used, even by Channels DVR or the HD Home Run default smart app, you'd see one turn red. And then this gives you an indication of whether a channel is HD or not, but it doesn't tell you if it's broadcasting in 720 or 1080p. And you do have some DVR options. Prefer HD resolution, replace lower resolution items, allow partial airings. If you want to have the DVR run a minute before recording and a minute after, you can do that. But with only 2 tuners, that might pose a problem. If you're recording 2 separate shows back to back that are on at the same time frame, say from 8 to 8:30, 8:30 to 9, 9 to 9:30, and then the same thing for another channel. Well, because of the overlap, one overlap needs 2 tuners because the other tuner has to start before the first tuner has finished recording. So then if you're doing that for 2 different shows at the same time, you'd actually need 4 tuners where I only have 2. So if there's no overlap, my tuner could record back-to-back shows on 2 different channels at the same time. And this is a confusing thing, and someone's recording might fail. They might think there's a problem with Plex, but they simply ran out of available tuners. So hopefully that makes sense. So then if we go back to live TV and into the DVR settings, with my 2 tuners, this is again the dangerous option to use. And you can do a post-processing script. It's nothing I've ever done, but there are services out there, programs out there that can search for commercials and remove them automatically. Plex can do that too. It can detect and delete, or just mark for skip. So let's just save those, and then there's an option here for the tuner, and you'll see that it's local broadcast listings from when I added the tuner, and the transcoder quality is set to highest quality. So you can change these settings also. So last but not least, the last important thing anyway, are the troubleshooting options. If you're brand new to Plex, you'll eventually hear the term Plex dance. The Plex dance is used if your media isn't named fully compliant and doesn't scan in properly. After you've renamed the media and it still won't scan in properly, what you do is you'd go to the affected library folder and you'd remove the library from Plex. Let's get into that library. This is the regular TV show library. Plex scanned automatically based on my settings, but if it didn't scan automatically based on those settings, you would go to the three dots, Manage Library. The three dots, Scan Library Files. When that was done, which it is, you'd go to the three dots again, Manage Library, empty the trash, confirm it. Okay, I am in the wrong interface. I'm in the Plex Player app, which is another one of the web apps, but it doesn't really matter. So once you remove the media, not delete it, remove it, scan the library again, empty the trash, you'd go to Troubleshooting, and you clean your bundles. And on a big server, this will take a little bit. On a tiny one like this, it's instantaneous. Then you go back and you move the folder for your movie or TV shows back in where it belongs. So I'll paste it back into the main TV show library. Based on my settings, Plex is going to scan that automatically, and now that it's been renamed properly and the Plex dance has been performed, Plex will find it properly. So the Plex dance is a little troubleshooting step. Sometimes if you've named media wrong and Plex won't scan it, it still won't scan it until you Plex dance it and have it named properly. So that's the Plex dance. Back to troubleshooting. You can also manually optimize your database, but remember, under scheduled task, I'm doing both of these things regularly. And then console just kind of shows you what's going on behind the scenes. I have no idea how to read Plex logs or know what any of this is. You might be interested in it. And then plugins have basically been discontinued, but still sort of supported. I don't use plugins, but if you wanted to play with it, this is where you'd play with it. Okay, so we are done with this. The last thing is the Plex HTPC client app, which can be found at Plex's downloads. So just search Plex downloads. And now Plex is going to recognize the OS you're on, so it knows I'm on the Linux OS. So if I click into it, let's see, where do we want to be? I'm sorry, I need to change from this Plex Media Server tab to the Apps and Devices. So now if I click into it, you'll see a segregation. Here are all three versions of the Plex HTPC client app. So you grab the one you need for your operating system. And here's the Plex desktop app, which is really the premier web version, or the web app. So if I wanted to download the HTPC client app for Windows, I click this and definitely get it here and not from the Microsoft Store. If I wanted to do it for Linux, it's going to tell me that it's only available as a flat hub, or from the FlatHub store as a Flatpak, or from the Snap store under Ubuntu. Those are the only two options. And then under Mac, I don't know anything about a Mac, but here's the download for a Mac. as long as you meet these requirements. So let me start my version up. Well, actually, I think I've got it started. And when you first start it up, you're going to see every available server you're connected to. And because I run multiple servers and I'm connected to a couple friends' servers, I see them. Now this is all keyboard driven, but the mouse will work here. I'm going to pick the server we've been talking about, continue, and then you can choose which libraries you want to pin automatically. And they're going to pin in this order. Continue. So you'll see, because I just added that movies DVR, it shows up as a new library, and so does the TV DVR, and so does the music, because I added all three of those in this session. But this app will help you understand, or demoing this app will help you understand the Plex interface. If I wanted to move this library higher, I'd start by hovering over it, then slide to the left, click into the three dots, and here I could unpin it so I don't see it, or I could reorder it and move it up higher. I like having the watch list at the top, and then I like having my movie library and then my TV show library next. And then I like having my music library after them. So if you've got multiple libraries and you have users who don't have little kids and never want to see a kids movie library or a kids TV show library, they can click into the three dots and unpin it and remove it from their listing. They can always find it again under More and do the same thing to bring it back and then reorder it. So let's find Discover. And I need to go down under Plex, and you'll see the different libraries. I could expand that to show every library in those different servers, but I'm going to go down to Plex. And okay, Discover is already pinned, and I missed it. It's right there. I'm going to reorder that and bring that below watch list. So now when I go to home, home will be ordered by the order I put everything in. So it's watch list, Discover, movies, TV shows. So now if I slide over, I've got ribbons from Discover. I've got a ribbon from the watch list, and then I go to a ribbon for my movie library, and then a ribbon for my TV show library, and a ribbon for my music library, and then all the other ribbons are based on how each library is sorted to the left. And let's see, if I click into my username and go to settings, and almost all client apps are similar, I can turn off my sync and watch state ratings. I can change the experience if I want to change when the screensaver pops up. I can change the visibility of this app to make it maximize or full screen. Right now it's full screen, and I can toggle back and forth between windowed and maximum, but if I want to change to full screen, I choose that in the settings. There's player experience options, and really you can leave almost everything by default, but you should check under video and make sure local quality is set to original. And if you're not the server owner but they have the available bandwidth, you'd want maximum quality unlimited to, or to whatever your server owner tells you to set it to if you're not the server owner yourself. These used to all be set at 720p at 4 megabits per second. But recently, well, I don't even see that, 2 megabits per second. yeah, 720p, oh, I'm sorry, 4 megabits per second, 2 gigabytes per hour. This is where they were all set by default, but Plex has recently upped those limits, and at least on my Android TV devices, they are now set for unlimited. You can look through the options, but that's the most important. You don't need to do anything with the subtitles, especially if the server owner has enabled for subtitles automatically. This just picks up the port that's being used, secure options, things like that. So basically that's a client app, and there is a setting someplace to have your libraries remember where you've changed them to. So a library will always have 3 or 4 tabs to it. The recommended, the library, and if you have collections created, it will have a collection tab. And then a while back, Plex added this category tag or tab that I personally don't use myself. So library tab, you can then choose to sort by different criteria. I could look at the folders. I could search by genre. I could search by year or release date, or sort. Let's say sort, not so much search. And the same with TV shows. So if I left this at categories, backed out of it, went into something else and came back, if I had set the client app to remember what I was doing, it would stay at categories, but because that setting is not set, it goes back to the default recommended view. So there's one last thing I want to show you, and that's one trick with the library. So you want to go to your settings of your server in libraries under manage, and then if you hover over a library, you can click into the manage recommendations. Well, these are appearing on my ribbons and the ribbons of any user, and you'll see there's a seasonal movie option too that's always checked. So when Plex comes out with their Halloween seasonal list or their Christmas seasonal list that they might call holiday or Christmas or whatever they end up calling it each year, this is why that appears on your screen. If you want to disable that for you and your users, you can do that here. And I leave this default, but occasionally I'll force a collection on here, and I have a video for that too. So let's go to TV shows and manage recommendations. This is something I do. I also add a ribbon for recently released episodes. And this is one of the few areas you don't have to drop down to save changes. So now if I go back in to the HTPC client app and start it fresh, when I go into my TV show library, under recommended, you now see that extra recently added in TV shows ribbon. And that will also appear under home now. When I get down to the TV show level, you'll see that added ribbon right here. I probably should show you one last thing. Let's create a collection and I'll show you how to pin it here. So go to libraries, and I'll go to my main movie library, and I'm going to manually pick, I don't know, 4 movies, and I will edit them, go to the tag option, drop down, and we'll call this collection Must Watch per L. I have to click here to add it, and now I can just save changes. And let me see if I back out. and come back in. Well, so this is easier with a web app. I can't refresh the player app. So if I go into the web app, which I had moved off screen, and now go into the library, I'm sorry, wrong section, library, movies, after refreshing it, it now shows a collections tab. And now I could edit this poster with custom artwork and on background if I want. But I could also, let's back up to here. I'm sorry, wrong spot. Okay, from here, I've got the must watch per al. If I hit these three dots here, I can choose visible on these three options. Library home and friends home. And now if I return to the manage recommendations, I can take this new entry and drag it up to the third position. And again, there's no save. So now if I enter the HTPC client app again, and go to my movie library, I've added my own custom ribbon based on a collection. So if you have maybe a couple different Christmas movie collections, maybe you have a Christmas collection of animated things like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and Frosty the Snowman, and then you have more traditional Christmas movies in a collection like White Christmas or It's a Wonderful Life. You can display those collections and then remove them. So at Christmas time, I display a couple of my Christmas collections on the home for all my friends and family and myself. I do the same thing at Halloween, just like I'm creating those adding those pre-roll videos. I add some custom collections. When it's around the Academy Awards ceremony, I might add in my Oscar collection. So you can have fun customizing Plex. And I know this is a long video, but I wanted a visual aid for a brand new Plex server owner to know how to set their server up, and it may be laborious to watch this video and pause it to then adjust your own settings, but at least you have the resource that kind of starts from A, goes through Z, and again, everything starts with good file structure. I can't stress that enough. Give yourself a good folder structure that's nested, and then make sure you follow Plex's rules. This would be the minimum for a library folder. I prefer adding the source ID from TMDB. I'm sorry. Let's go into a movie library. So I prefer the source ID for every movie folder name. And then you don't need the extra information, and you really just need the basic name. But I do add in the source ID again to the file name. And all of my media scans in perfectly the first time. I never have to bother with fix match, and I consider fix match a failure on my part to not have named my media properly. So before I use fix match, I'll go find my error and fix the file or folder name so it then scans in properly. So everything starts with good structure, and the Plex support documents are where you should turn for everything. Ignore all advice unless the person giving you the advice is quoting one of the support documents. So, happy Plexing, and thanks for watching my video.